Hello all and welcome to the Movie Bears podcast. I'm Brad Harrison. Each week I'm joined by Husky Harry, huggable homos who love film, to dish up a little bit of movie news and review a film, either current or classic. With me as usual this week are my fantastic co-hosts. Jim Pugliafico is back on the show. Welcome, Jim.
Thank you, babe, and welcome to the podcast, everyone.
And Will Lindis is with us as well. Welcome, Will.
Hey, ka-chow! Ready to talk movies tonight.
Vroom, vroom. We're going to be reviewing the latest film in the Disney Pixar Cars franchise, that, of course, being Cars 3, hence Will's ka-chow reference. We're also going to be serving up some movie news, which we haven't done in a little bit, so we are excited to get to that. But first, that was my best Julie Chen impression, guys, with Big Brother coming up next week.
But you got to turn and look over your shoulder.
It's true. Let me set this up. Here we go. Ready? But first, it's going to be the most twisted summer yet. How was that?
Yeah.
Was that better? Maybe a little bit?
You were channeling the chin bot there. Perfect.
You can even say I was channeling her.
You were channeling the chin bot. I love this. I love it. It's perfect.
Channeling sounds a little sexual, actually, so maybe I'm going to, stray away from that term.
Channeling sounds like something that's either on Urban Dictionary right now or will be as soon as I come up with some terribly lurid act to go along with it. So, listeners, you know what channeling is. Send it my way.
Oh goodness.
That's terrible advice.
Oh, wow. All right. Well, we are going to get things rocking and rolling here. Just a quick note. If you are with us watching live, hello, glad to have you here. Feel free to pop out that live chat, drop us a note, tell us your thoughts on Cars 3. As long as your thoughts are, YouTube appropriate, we will be happy to give you a shout out on air. We'd love to know what you guys think. So keep that in mind. If you were listening on digital tape delay, we love you guys too. You may not be able to comment live, but feel free to leave us a note on the Facebook post or Twitter post, however you found this week's episode. We'd love to hear from you guys as well. But a couple things. One, we said last week we were going to do a Movie Bears of the Month Pride Edition segment on this week's show. We got some cool submissions for you guys. However, some of you guys commented that your Pride events aren't happening till this coming weekend. So some folks asked if it would be possible to submit for next week instead. And, we kind of talked about it. We had a little MBP conclave. We watch for the smoke to come up out of the thing. And we decided that we are going to do it next week. And we're going to put all of your pictures together from all the different Pride events you guys have been going to. And we will have our random name selector pick them from there. So not to worry if you're one of those folks who was like, oh my gosh, can I submit next week? Or if you were just like, oh, well, mine's next week, I'm not going to do anything. Guess what? Now's your chance. You still have an opportunity to submit your pictures. So we'll put another post up on Facebook. But if you want to go add some pictures to the post that's already there, feel free. Entries in both posts will be valid. With that said, guys, how do we feel about movie news? Are we ready for that? Is it time?
Very excited about movie news. It's one of those segments, like you said, we don't get to do a lot. We're double featuring or, handling whatever major issue is. So I like it when we kind of get to settle back into our movie news roots.
Yeah, absolutely. I think my engine's revved. Let's go.
Nice. All right. Well, that said, here we go. Some movie news. All right. So this is the part of the show where we lovingly call out things we are excited about that are happening in the film world. Will, why don't you kick us off this week? What's got you excited?
Absolutely. So the thing that's got me excited this week is the type of thing that really shouldn't get me excited because it's a sports movie, and I am not sports movie guy. That is not my lane. That is.
Is this going to be our all sports show today?
You know what? You're right. Cars is a sports movie. Okay, yeah. So oh my gosh. Maybe that's why it's on my brain. But so There, a few years ago, and on this show, we've talked about Doc Ellis, who is the baseball player who's very famous for, he played with the Pirates in like the 70s, I think with the Yankees as well, did some world championship stuff, and was sort of infamous after retirement for pitching a no-hitter while just completely laced out of his brain on LSD. So a couple years ago, we watched this really cool documentary about the guy, a documentary, D-O-C-K. I think it's on Netflix now. And it was my sort of introduction to this character outside of just that one little anecdote. Well, I'm going to get to hear even more Doc Ellis stuff because it's just been announced that there is a biopic about the life and times of Doc Ellis. So far, it's untitled, so it's just Untitled Doc Ellis Biopic. But what excites me about this is the talent that's attached to it. Ice Cube, for former Ice Cube, has snatched this up as one of the producers, and they're actually casting his son, O'Shea Jackson Jr., in the role of Doc Ellis. O'Shea Jackson Jr. is someone that we've seen in very, very prominently, very recently in Straight Outta Compton, which was pretty solid, maybe not perfect, but, was good enough from a little while ago. And he's in a film this summer called Ingrid Goes West with Aubrey Plaza, which I'm looking forward to. So this is he's kind of a hot young talent right now. I'm excited to see what he does with this content. And for it being one of the sports stories that does already automatically have my interest, and there's not a ton. Again, it's not my thing. I want to see this movie. Now we have to wait a little while. It's just been, it's just getting ready to start, like the casting and production and all that. But I don't know. Jim, Brad, does this one excite you?
I didn't even know about this movie until you had mentioned it in our chat leading up to the show. And I'm like, he's going to do a Doc Ellis. Wait, is he going to talk about the movie we saw 2 years ago at South by? And which was really good. Don't get me wrong. I mean, I enjoyed that documentary. I'm of the three of us here, I might be the most sportsy guy, even though I'm not like super sportsy. But, the Doc Ellis story interested me because it was from the era where I was like a teen and, young adult watching baseball. And I got interested in that. And he was a name that I heard, but I didn't know much about him. And when in the tagline of the movie, it says, hey, this guy is, he was a rising star and he became notorious or famous for pitching a no-hitter, and then years later they found out he was high on LSD when he pitched this no-hitter, which was pretty amazing. And the stories that you hear in the documentary were really funny. So I'm definitely looking forward to this movie. Straight Outta Compton was a movie that surprised me in a lot of ways, so I'm looking forward to seeing what that company and this talent, O'Shea Jackson, can do in this movie. So yeah, good one, Will.
All right. Well, I haven't seen the documentary that you guys saw. I think that was the year that I unfortunately did not get to go to South by, but the movie definitely looks interesting. I'm definitely up for learning more about the character.
Life of Doc Ellis.
Yeah, it'll I mean, it's one of those things where like I don't know a lot about sports outside of like the few sports that I follow. And baseball definitely has not been one of those sports. So there's a big history and knowledge gap there for me, but sounds like a quality film. We will see. Jim, what have you got this week?
Let's see. I just happen to have some news about a movie that's a ways off yet, but has my attention, as you can imagine. It's about the next Godzilla movie from Legendary Pictures. Today it was announced that they started actual production shooting the movie of what they're calling Godzilla, what's being called Godzilla 2. A couple months ago, we may have talked about this on the show, that when they announced the movie was coming, and the title was at the time was Godzilla King of Monsters. Well, now they're kind of backing away from that title and calling this movie Godzilla 2. I mean, it's still going to be about Godzilla. It's going to have more monsters in it. which kind of excites me. Some of the classic Godzilla foes that we've seen in some of the Toho Godzilla movies. It's being directed by Michael Dougherty, who directed Krampus and Trick or Treat, which was kind of an anthology thing that is actually got him a lot of notoriety. So this one should be interesting, how he handles this kind of movie. I wasn't a huge fan of Krampus, but I did like Trick or Treat. So we'll see. This one's got a great cast. It's got Kyle Chandler, Vera Farmiga, Millie Bobby Brown, who you guys probably know from Stranger Things. And by the way, O'Shea Jackson Jr. is in this movie too, apparently, which is kind of odd.
I don't know what your news item is going to be, Brad, but don't let us down.
Yeah. And of course, Ken Watanabe, Sally Hawkins, who I love. So yeah, I'm excited for this. Get to see some Godzilla foes, but we got to wait till March of 2019 to see it. So, and we'll also probably get an announcement of the title sometime before then. So, yeah, looking forward to this one.
You know, it's interesting about the title. So I kind of liked the King of Monsters title, and I know, kind of reading about this as it was developing, like, it's not that Godzilla 2 is the final title. It's just that they've kind of like moved it back to like an untitled project. So now I'm really curious, like, if it's going to involve any kind of like story changes from what was originally envisioned, because wasn't this like originally under like a different director? Weren't there some changes that were made on the back end?
I think so. I think there were a couple of other directors. I think even at the very beginning, the director of the 2014 Godzilla, Gareth Edwards, was attached to this until, he got into some other little indie film called Star Wars something or other. And that kind of distracted him from the Godzilla world. But yeah, I think it's changed a couple of times since we settled on this Michael Dougherty as director.
Yeah, it looks pretty neat to me. And this is as someone who was lower on the last Godzilla movie than the two of you. I liked this particular director with this particular property. I wasn't as big on Krampus either. I think there were some problems there. But he did fantastic work working with an ensemble in the vignettes of Trick or Treat. So I feel like as large a cast as this is, and you mentioned some real either heavy hitter names or some up and comers when you we're going through the cast list. I feel like this is a young talent who has the potential to work really well with the large cast and make sure not too many people fall through the cracks. That's my hope. That's the optimism I'm going into it. I'm excited for Godzilla 2, King of Monsters, Let Godzilla Reign, whatever it's called. I want to see it.
Very good. Very good. But again, we got to wait a while. So
just a touch. It seems like we're always waiting on movies. They're not always worth the wait, but hopefully this one will be. Fingers crossed.
Go ahead, Brad. I was going to say, I'm getting my Blu-ray of Shin Godzilla sometime in July. So that may keep me busy until the next Godzilla movie.
That'll be great, because then I can like pause so that I can read the subtitles at the top, in the middle, and at the bottom. You can't normally
Yeah.
Hey, speaking of movies that we've been waiting a while for, no secret that the Marvel Cinematic Universe has been building toward this Avengers Infinity War thing that's happening, right? So many movies leading up to this big film event. And it was kind of fun. Scarlett Johansson was on the Late Show with Stephen Colbert a little while ago. And during the course of the interview, she was talking about how there's going to be like 62 Marvel characters in this film. It is going to be stock full. And she mentioned one scene in particular. There are like 32 on screen at one time with so many things going on. It's kind of crazy. So, maybe O'Shea Jackson will like make a CGI suit cameo or something. Maybe he's in there, guys. I don't know. But
I want exactly that. Like, I want O'Shea Jackson's role in that to be like he's wearing green spandex with the little white orbs, like the motion capture suit, with no CGI on it. He's just lurking in the background in that suit. Like, oops, we forgot to CGI O'Shea. That's the role he should play.
Oh goodness, indeed, it could happen. But I don't know how I feel about this. I mean, I know we've had Guardians of the Galaxy, and apparently they're all making an appearance, and we've got Thor and Captain America and Black Widow. I mean, like everybody, Ant-Man, and I'm assuming Wasp, maybe. I don't know. I wanted to ask you guys. I mean, is this becoming like too much of a good thing? You think? Is it going to broach that line for you guys?
For me, this is the place to have
know.
that, right? Like if this were it's Ant-Man 2 and 64 people were on screen at the same time, that would be a problem because it draws attention away from Ant-Man. When we are this far, and if this were the first Avengers movie where they were still sort of establishing the characters and you tried to cram that many in, that would be a problem too. I think at this point, we've seen so much of these characters. We know so much of these characters. And this is the Battle Royale kind of two-parter film. Like, I don't know how it's going to be. It could be too much. It could be a clusterfuck, and it has every chance of pulling that off. But I think at this point, like, if you're going to have, like, all of your characters appear anywhere, like that giant comic book splash page of everyone, I think this part in the timeline and this particular movie, the Avengers movie, is the one to have it in, if that makes sense. Like, if you're going to do it, this is the place for it.
Yeah, I mean, boy, it's almost like they're loading the critics' gun already for that movie when they come out and say, oh, we're going to stuff as many characters in this movie as we can. Who knows? They could have some great way of doing it. I'm not going to pass judgment on the movie until I see it. It'll be a lot for me to take in. I'm sure I won't even know a good portion of those superhero characters, especially if we haven't seen them before in other movie properties. So, yeah, it should be kind of crazy. When is that thing coming out?
I don't have it handy. Do you, Brad?
Yeah, I don't either. No, and
yeah,
I think it's next year, right? Like, I think they're.
I'm looking it up.
Holy crap!
Yeah.
I don't know this.
Yeah.
I mean,
and the whole podcast comes to a standstill.
I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
This is good for us to know. Like,
May,
this is like
it's May 4th, 2018. So it's coming out next year.
So
less than a year from now.
Less than a year.
Yeah.
That feels right.
Okay.
It feels like the right time frame for a film that's apparently where it's at in production. Okay.
Yeah, Will, you mentioned the splash panel thing, and that's one of the things I love about reading like some of these ensemble comic books, like Justice League or Avengers, right? Like you have a lot of these team ups, lots of things going on, and I love those splash panels. My problem with the movie version, though, is like when it's a big splash panel, I can stop and like focus on the different sections, you know what I mean, of the page or on my iPad or whatever. I can zoom in and see what's going on. When I'm seeing this movie in a theater, I can only count on like what my eyes and brain are able to absorb, you know what I mean? Like as it's happening. So maybe on like a DVD or Blu-ray release, you can like hit pause and really get in there and try and see what's going on. But I just, and Steve, I see you in the chat. Steve's like, Brad, how dare you, even thinking that like it could be too much of a good thing. I don't know. I feel like it's possible that it could be too much. Although I really loved the third Captain America film. I think they did a great job with those scenes. So, maybe we just have a bunch of little people in the background and like the big folks kind of more in the foreground. That would work better for me. I don't know. We'll see. I mean, I'm excited for the film. I just hope it's not overstuffed and crazy.
I think that's a really good point, Brad. Like, we saw them pull off 12?
Yeah.
Pretty effectively in Civil War. 12 to 32 is a huge jump. So this really does feel like, I mean, it's a risk, right? When you it sounds like what they're doing is like they're teeing up something pretty risky, like they're calling their shot, pointing in the outfield, and they're trying to square up their home run. When you have a risk, you have the chance of it also backfiring too. So I think that they are, again, I think they're far enough in. This will be their, 16th or 17th film by that point. I think by that point in your franchise, you can be riskier than if it was like your first or even your third or whatever film. So it could completely backfire. But I'm hoping it's not. Like, I want it to be good.
Well,
we'll
see.
good.
all I could think of is they might have some kind of novel way, an interesting way to do this, other than just slamming a bunch of characters on the screen. And that's what I'm hoping for. Something that, exceeds expectation of like, oh, just parade a bunch of superhero characters through all these scenes. We had that fight scene in, was it the last Captain America movie?
Yeah.
The airport fight scene. I mean, they got a lot of folks into that scene. So all it would take is just a couple of cool action scenes like that to get most of these characters in there.
Mm-hmm. Indeed.
We'll see. Somebody jumps on camera, does a quip, jumps off. That's the way Marvel does it.
They're gonna cram superheroes into this movie like bears into like a summer party pool. Like it's just going to be like just all like superheroes just pressed up against each other. Actually, I'm now really looking forward to this movie.
They're going to be pulling like little bits of like rubber and spandex out of the pool filter after the party.
Whose mask is this? Whose mask is this?
This is the half domino mask, and we've got a double. Anyway, well, we'll see how this all comes out in 11 months ish. But hey, just a quick hello to those of you who are with us in the live chat. I want to give out a shout to Dan as well. Hey, Dan McCord, glad to see you here with us. Hello. And Steve as well. Welcome. Glad to have you here too. Hey, we're going to be jumping into our Cars 3 review here momentarily. I'm curious for those of you guys in the live chat, did any of you actually see Cars 3? Because here's the pre-movie discussion question. Because of Cars 2, have people checked out of this franchise? We're going to talk about it after this really awesome trailer and music that Jim cuts in here for you. We'll return to that topic. But before we do, just, hey, a quick point. If you have not seen Cars 3 yet, because maybe Cars 2 put a bad taste in your mouth, don't worry, we're going to give you some spoiler-free impressions on whether we think maybe this film redeemed the franchise, maybe it's worth checking out or not, and then we'll give you a fair warning before we kick things into overdrive and go full-on spoilers. But all of that said, guys, are you ready? We're 22 minutes into the show at this point. Are you in the driver's seat? Are you prepared for the flag to go?
I don't know. I was ready at 2 minutes in.
Yeah, let's do this. I'm ready to see what the finish line brings us.
See, this is the part of the show where I give you guys a chance to make a really bad pun. So I'm glad to see you guys rising to the challenge.
Those were awful puns. Those were I feel like that was definitely our D game. So hopefully the puns get better from here on out. No promises, listeners.
Oh goodness. All right. Well then here we go. Our discussion of Cars 3. All right. So before we have Jim kind of kick us off with a little, intro of the film and his initial thoughts, I want to return to that question that I asked before we inserted the trailer. And again, Jim, thanks for all of your editing magic.
Wasn't it wonderful?
It was so good. I haven't even heard it yet, but
your ears off.
I moved to tears.
The TARDIS totally just whooshed in, and the doctor told me from the future that it's amazing. So, Jim, you rock. So, in all seriousness, before we get into the movie discussion, I wanted to ask, do you feel like, based on what you've seen on social media, so Twitter, Facebook, are people seeing this movie after Cars 2 was such a sort of car wreck departure? Is this something that you've seen guys talking about, or what's your experience?
My experience has been pretty light. I know that officially, looking at the box office numbers, that it did well. People saw this movie. I've not heard anyone talking about it or checking into seeing it. So I feel like the audience that might be seeing this is skewing a good 20 plus years younger than me. But I could be wrong. I don't have the numbers to back that up. I have my anecdotal experience at the theater and just the lack of seeing adults talking about this movie.
Yeah, and Will. I think you're kind of on a good thought train there. I mean, how do I put this? To answer the question, I think the movie it's tough. I didn't see a lot of talk about it in my Facebook feed either. But I think in terms of us and our community, I think this movie has some things, working against it. First of all, even if you're a Pixar fan, a lot of people, adults our age and in our community think, hey, Pixar movie, they think kids movie right away. And so that's kind of one strike against it. Secondly, it's about cars. It's about car racing. And not that folks in our community don't care about cars and stuff, but car racing generally isn't a big thing in, a big interest area in our community. And yes, it does exist. There are people in there that will, see a racing movie. I'm one of them, but I just don't think that I have a lot of friends that a movie like this would draw. Secondly, you're right, Brad. Cars 2, I think any momentum that this franchise had, I think Cars 2, and not only Cars 2, but like the Planes spinoff movie, I think kind of killed this whole idea about anthropomorphized, and oh God, I have trouble with this word. Anthropomorphized, normally inanimate vehicles like cars, planes, boats, whatever. So those three things going against it, it's tough to get probably any interest within our community here. But like you said, Will, the movie did okay. Over the weekend, it did okay numbers, and I think that's mainly, you're right. I think it's from kids, families with kids, and that kind of audience. But that said, we still saw it, and we're going to talk about it.
I think the reason why it doesn't resonate so much with our community is because it has the wrong kind of drag racing in it, Jim.
Yeah. First of all, it's racing, but it's not drag racing, and it's not the right kind of drag racing. So,
if there was a RuPaul's Drag Race Pixar crossover, like I would buy opening night, next night after that tickets. Like, make that movie, Pixar.
That's going to be Cars 4 Drag Race. So be on the lookout.
I'm on the lookout. I am refreshing firstshowing.net right now until I see that. So
I just hope that Todrick Hall gets like a starring role in the film.
Oh, see, yeah, you're just making this pot sweeter and sweeter for me.
It could definitely happen. I could totally see him voicing, one of the drag racing cars.
Even if it was just like a 30-second like scene where like in the background they're like at a track or something, there's like a drag racing strip, except instead of the cars actually racing, they're like sauntering down the runway. Like that would be awesome.
Oh, and there's one over there just beating its face.
And then like a little group of them being like, girl, no he didn't. Like that would be awesome. Anyway. All right. Well, let's actually get into our review of the film we're here to talk about. Jim, if you wouldn't mind just giving us a little bit of setup, backstory here, and your initial thoughts. I think we have some folks in the live chat and definitely listening on Digital Tape Delay. Probably haven't seen this one yet and could be swayed. So what would you say to these people?
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about, like I said, kind of a movie that almost nobody really wanted. There's been a lot of pushback to Pixar about this whole Cars universe thing, including me. And yes, I liked the first movie enough. I didn't think it was great. I didn't think it was in the top level of Pixar movies. But I went back and recently watched it, and I found it to be a pretty good movie about the idea of getting lost to find yourself. And only with, of course, gorgeously animated, sentient talking cars. And that's what we have. But the sequel, Cars 2, was so awful. I recently watched that one, and I stopped watching halfway through for not because the movie was bad, but because of other reasons. And even though I'm a completist, I just didn't really want to get back to that movie. In the first 30 minutes, I'm like, this is really horrible. What the fuck were they thinking when they did this movie? They took something that was a decent idea in the first movie and totally kind of ruined it, I thought. So anyway, here we are, summer movie weekend, without really another big movie opening this weekend. And so I'll just give you the plot synopsis for Cars 3. Blindsided by a new generation of super fast racers, the legendary Lightning McQueen finds himself being pushed out of the sport he loves. To get back in the game, he will need the help of an eager young race trainer / technician, Cruz Ramirez, with her own plan to win, plus inspiration from the late fabulous Hudson Hornet and a few unexpected turns. Proving that number 95 isn't through yet will test the heart of a champion on Piston Cups Racing's biggest stage. So there you go. There you have the plot synopsis for the movie. No spoilers in there. This one's directed by a guy named Brian Fee. It was it's his first film that he's directed, although he did work art department on other Pixar films like Ratatouille and Wall-E, and both Cars movies. The voice cast in here, I think, in my opinion, I think the voice cast does a really good job here. We have Owen Wilson as Lightning McQueen returning. We have newcomer Krista Alonso, Arnie Hammer, Chris Cooper, who I love in anything he does. Surprise Leah Delario from Orange is the New Black, which was awesome. Mm-hmm. Nathan Fillion and Bonnie Hunt returns, and a whole bunch of other peoples. I'll start my reaction by saying this movie surprised me in a good way. I've said it before, and I know I'm going to end up saying it again, I hope, that surprises like this movie are the reasons I love watching movies so much. It's what keeps me coming back to see movies. I don't have very high expectations, and then a movie kind of hits me in some way or another, and like, wow, that one kind of surprised me. I think in this movie, Pixar showed a surprising level of self-awareness, and did the smartest thing they could have done, which was listen to the reception to Cars 2, which was a big misstep, and steer like as hard as they could away from doing another clumsy attempt, right, to expand the universe and get back to a character-driven, emotional storytelling like we know from Pixar. But while still making a story feel as fresh as they can, and not be a retread, right, of another movie or another story. I'm just going to say, I'm going to leave it there and say, I did enjoy this movie a lot. I have a lot more to say about it, and I'm sure we'll get into discussion. But it's a big recommend for me. I know mileage will vary, and I would urge people,
mileage will vary.
But I'd urge people, even those who are burned by Cars 2, to get out of the almost unbearable heat wave we're in right now and give this one a chance in theaters. You could do a lot worse than watching this movie in a comfy air-conditioned theater with tasty snacks and a cold drink. So yes, it's a recommend for me.
All right, there you go. Well, Steve in the live chat says he's the worst Pixar fan ever. He hasn't even seen Cars 1 yet. Steve, I will tell you, do not berate yourself, my friend, because I didn't see any of the Cars movies until last week. We were like, oh shit, what are we going to review next week? Oh, Cars 3. Oh, great. I haven't seen 1 and 2 yet. So I sat down, and Jim, you and I watched the first one. Well, we watched both of them together, but we watched the first one together early last week. And as sort of I feared it would be, it was a conglomeration of like rednecks, racing, and country music. 3 things that like don't immediately like make my heart like, I don't know, thump with excitement. And I'll tell you, and Jim, I feel so bad that you had to watch this movie with me, because I think through like, I don't know, the first hour and a half of the 2-hour movie, I'm like sighing like every 5 breaths. I'm like rolling my eyes. I'm like, is this fucking movie going anywhere? Like, I don't know. I had a lot of problems with it. And then like the last half hour, it kind of turned around, and I was like, okay, that wasn't so bad. I kind of like that. Really interested to see what happens with Lightning McQueen. Like, where does he go from here? And then we get Cars 2. and Lightning kind of disappears because it becomes the Mater show, everybody. And like, it's all about what stupid fucking Mater's doing right now, y'all. And I just like, ugh, that character, like a little bit of him is funny, but a lot of him just, ugh, man, it's just way too much for me. And so, you know, I had a really hard time with Cars 2. So coming into Cars 3, sorry, it was a lot of lead up. I'm just kind of like, I really hope, you know, based on what we've seen in the trailers, it seems like it's a return to Lightning and what's really going on there. I really hope that that's going to be the case. And I got to say, I was pleasantly surprised. Cars 3 is by far my favorite film in the Cars franchise. Jim, you mentioned it kind of makes a return to some of the like character drama and heart that made the end of the first one so great for me. And I mean, I feel like this whole film is that here. There's also a lot of really cool visual things that happen here that are, there's like some cool Spielbergian like fog, World War II kind of stuff going on. There's like some Remember the Titans kind of stuff like going, like there's a lot happening here that makes for kind of like a neat departure and kind of a cool homage to the first film. And we'll talk more about it in spoilers and sort of how that works. But I really like this idea of this new up and coming generation. They're newer cars, they're faster. You know, how do you maybe like, you know, when you think about the millennials that are coming up and they want to take your job if you're middle-aged, you know, how do you keep yourself relevant? How do you stay on top? And I think it's a really interesting question, and this movie does a great job of addressing it. So looking forward to chatting spoilers with you guys. This one's a big recommend for me, which I can't believe I'm saying about a Cars movie, guys. I won't lie.
Yeah, I think that you're dead on with one of the things you said there, Brad. Like, this is definitely the best of the Cars movies. Now, I say that, like, for me, that's slightly damning it with faint praise in that I thought the first Cars movie had a lot of disappointment for me. It was sort of the Pixar movie that first sort of showed some cracks in their armor. Because before that, Pixar was just like knocking them out of the park left and right. And Cars was much more commercialized and much more designed towards moving product. And they moved a lot of product. They sold so many Cars toys. It's unreal. So much so that I didn't watch the second one. I know that it's more of like a spy movie with Mater as the star. That's what I know. That's all I came into this movie with. And I have to say that one of the things that I think this film does right is that it's sort of like for the first time they understood, going back to your point from like at the very beginning of this episode, that this is a sports franchise. Because really the first movie is much more about like him sort of humbling himself in a small rustic town, right? Second one, I guess, is a spy movie. I can't speak directly, but, you know, again, I've heard. This one has a lot of, this is this character who is no longer the young upstart in his prime. He's the aging veteran in his sport. You've got all of these kind of young, more efficient, more streamlined cars that are trying to knock him out of his stop part. And so he has to retrain and do these training montages and become better and stronger, and in the process works with someone else and who helps him become better and stronger. I think that this is also the best possible ending for this franchise, and even the best possible ending for a franchise that I didn't really want to revisit to begin with. Like, I
just wanted it to end.
But yeah, it was just like, you know, oh, if they never make another Cars movie. As it was, like, I'm probably a little lower on this movie than the two of you are. I think there were long stretches for me that dragged a little bit, like where the film sort of lost its speed. Haha. But the good moments, especially the stuff towards the beginning and once it gets traction at the end, I think those really come back around for me. This is a solid light recommend. Like, this isn't one that I think people need to rush out and go see. Like, I feel like if you never see this movie, you're not going to be hurting. But at the same time, I look at the animated features that are on deck, right? Like, what have we got this year? We've got the Emoji Movie. We've got another Despicable Me movie, like, you know, more Minions. Like, when you say you could do worse in the box office, like, We really can, and probably are going to be doing worse later this year in the box office. So this is not necessarily like Pixar like completely fixing their franchise, but I do think that it's a good step forward. I think it does sort of recenter, reorient it, and clean off some of the more problematic things. There's a lot less Mater in this movie. Thank fucking God. Same thing. Even the first movie, there was too much Mater. Like that character does not do a thing for me. I think most important for me though, and this is the big question that I have for you guys. And it's a bit of a tangent. This universe confuses me. Like, because I when I watch these films, like, are these machines? Or are they organic? Because like, because if they're just straight up cars, then that's one thing. But then they like have tongues and eyeballs, and so if they're organic, do they have like full on like digestive systems? More importantly, like, do they fuck? Like, these are the things like that like are going through my mind after the theater. Like, I need to know more about this Cars universe because I can't wrap my brain around what these fucking things are. So what are they? Are they machines or are they actual, like, living things? Or what are they?
Hey, Lightning, that's a real big dipstick you got there, Lightning.
Fucking whole think pieces have been written, Will, about the questions that you raise. I mean,
go read them.
And every time I read one, I'm like, why the fuck are you trying to think about this? Like, this movie creates a world with rules in it, and it sticks to its rules. It doesn't have to explain every little thing. Like, it doesn't have to explain why there's no door handles, why there's young cars, why there's old cars, what, like,
and why you can't just fucking like have your engine replaced to make you go faster.
Oh, that's a whole nother.
So that was okay. So that's actually getting to part of it because like, one of the big problems was like the new cars are made more efficiently, right? Which is supposed to be like an analog for they're younger and faster. It's kind of like, no longer being like the young hot stud in your sport. But if they are like just cars, like I kept thinking like, well, what is keeping someone from just like upgrading themselves? I mean, obviously this isn't the franchise to do it, but you could almost have like, if this were a more adult storyline, I think there would be a really good story about like kind of a steroids analog, like, steroids in sports type thing. I think you could tell that story really effectively in this world.
Some people were talking about, then you get into the whole argument. Oh, if you change the engine, if you change the body, are you really Lightning McQueen still? Are you something else? You know what I mean? Or if you give him like noxious fuel or whatever it is, like in Fast and Furious, that's the steroids of race cars. You know what I mean? That
oh my God. I want to see a car with a NOS addiction now, guys.
Oh, see? Well, and there's this like story, like if you've ever watched John Dies at the End or read the book, there's this story that they start, and it's a think piece story that you hear other places, but it's like, I go out and I've got this axe, and now the head breaks, and so I replace the head on my axe. And then the next week the handle breaks, so I replace the handle on my axe. Is it still the same axe that I had before or not? And so I think about that same story in conjunction with this particular movie. Like, why, if they did replace the engine, would it be a different personality inside of like Lightning McQueen's body? If so, is there like, that's kind of creepy. Like now you get into like some, now we're past the sports analog. Now we can get some like horror stuff happening in the Pixar universe. I guess for me, what's I guess even more interesting about this whole thing is that we've got Transformers coming up pretty soon, and maybe next week I'll pose the same question. Like, I'll ask how those cars reproduce. Like, we're gonna talk about trucks that fucks Redux. Like, we're gonna get all about like vehicular like nookie over the next couple of weeks.
I think you've been like working on that line for 4 days, Will. And, like, making a spot for you to get that in.
No, but
it's clever. I give you that.
More ups to it.
I'm gonna do that, Brad. Let's do that. Let's like get these wheels that like go on our hands and our feet, and like make like a truck, like with trucks.
Wait. So what you're just telling me is like you just broke Tumblr. Like
we'll call it Monster Chubs.
We're way off track here.
That's okay.
All right. I'm gonna rein this in, you guys. I'm gonna pull it back. I'm gonna bring us back.
It was fun.
Right.
It was fun.
It was definitely a fun tangent, but let's get out of the marbles and back on track to win this race.
On track.
2-1, baby. What? All right, so we've given you sort of our mostly spoiler-free suggestions. This is a big recommend for me and Jim. Will, sounds like it's a light recommend for you, which is good. So if you've not seen Cars 3 yet, you hated Cars 2 or you heard it was so bad you didn't even bother, Austin in the chat is saying you don't even have to worry about seeing Cars 2. I'm going to echo that. It plays no part in this movie whatsoever. It's like Pixar was like, you know what? Fuck Cars 2. Not even going to talk about it.
Yeah.
So don't let that hold you back. But guys, are we spoiler ready at this point? Yes.
Yeah. There's one character that I really want to talk about and I couldn't before. So yes, spoilers.
All right, babe, are you all set?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
All right.
Let's put a pun there.
Let's push the NOS and get going here. Spoilers are officially fair game for Cars 3. If you haven't seen the film yet, and we understand if you have not, you may actually, if you have any kind of interest at all, you may want to go ahead and just close our window if you're watching us live, or just mute us, come back in 10 or 15 minutes for plugs, or use the show time index in the notes that Jim puts together for you guys if you're listening on iTunes or Stitcher Radio. But we are going into spoilers. I have stalled enough. Will, why don't you kick us off? You mentioned there was a character you wanted to talk about. I have a feeling I know exactly who this is. But go ahead and bring that subject up and let's dive into it.
Yeah, so it wasn't like a surprise that this character was in the movie, but I didn't feel comfortable talking about her role in the movie, just because it does sort of get to the heart of the film's turn. And while it's a predictable turn, I think it was an effective turn. I really liked the character of Cruz Ramirez. That's the one that was Cristela Alonso. She begins the film as this trainer, but she has no quote unquote practical experience. Like, she's used to training in the lab, training and motivating people in the this high-tech sports center to perform at the best. And you find out through her friendship with Lightning, and I'm glad it never became a romantic one either. I thought that was good. But you find out that she's had aspirations of being a racer one day and has had it sort of hammered out of her that she can't ever be that. And there's this passing of the torch moment, we are in spoilers now, where Lightning discovers that his best, his growth arc in this film is not to be the racer that races his way back up to the top, but it's to pass the torch to her. She's got all of the kind of the physical advantages that he doesn't have, but he can be her trainer. And I thought that was a really cool arc. I loved her energy and just how much fun that character was. And I loved seeing the parallels between that and the kind of the flashbacks to Lightning and Doc. Yeah, Doc Hudson. His particular coach and trainer. I thought that was a really good. Again, it's predictable. You could kind of tell that's the direction the story was going. It wasn't a surprise at all for me when it got there, but I liked the way it got there. It was well done. I thought that was cool.
Yeah, I think predictable. Maybe I think there were several ways this movie could have gone, and until kind of the end, we really. Toward the end, we didn't quite know. I mean, this is a basic plot that you see in a lot of movies. It's a very familiar comeback story, right? The guy, he gets up in a crash, he's out of the picture, and he works his way back. He gets trained back in. He goes back and hits the touchstone of Smokey, the racing guru, and he's going to be great again. But he wins the last race, and that's the end of the movie. That definitely could have been the plot of this movie, but it subverted that in a very, very interesting way by taking this Cruz character, and then there were two very powerful scenes in this movie, and one of them was not the very end where he actually passes the torch. One was the scene in trailer after the Demolition Derby race, where they kind of have a heart-to-heart and they have it out, and she explains her position of like, people have told me that, don't think big, it will only lead to big disappointments, and I thought I could be a racer, and now I know I can't, and that's a big revelation for Lightning McQueen to hear, because he's always been at the top of the game, right? I love that scene. I thought the way the writing was, the way the photography was, I thought that was one of the more powerful scenes in any movie this year. And then there was another scene between Lightning McQueen and Smokey, where Lightning finds out that, what Doc thought was his like most impressive, most valued accomplishment was not winning all those races that he won, but it was mentoring Lightning to be as great as he was. And I thought those were really two well done scenes. And what that led to was, him at some point, and you could see it before the big race when they were racing together. Those scenes were awesome. Like just the joy of them racing out on the dirt track. And he's slowly coming to the realization that, hey, this other racer who was my trainer has got the chops to be really good. And that's maybe where my legacy, the next phase of my legacy lies. Really good stuff. For a kids movie, those are pretty hot, lofty things to put in a kids movie. But still great, because I think while they may not get it like right away, I think it's something that may sink in and, have an effect on kids going forward. So I love the movie for that. So, being a story guy, I love those storytelling, that tack that it took.
Well, and it's interesting because, Jim, you're talking about like how this movie maybe impacts or resonates with kids. I think back to like when I was a kid and we would like play on the playground. Of course, there were girls, and sometimes they wanted to like play with our friend group, but like there was really only like ever like one girl role in like all the big properties. Like if we were playing Ninja Turtles, the girl had to play April O'Neil, or like, if we were playing Star Wars, the girl had to play Princess Leia or whatever. And while those are cool characters, they weren't necessarily like, helming their own movie. You know what I mean? They weren't like the central star. And not that, not that Cruz is the central star here. It's very much about both of them. But like, I don't know if this is going to be the final film or not, but like, if there were a Cars 4 cruise control or something, like I would watch that at this point, I think, with her as kind of the main star and Lightning McQueen as sort of like a background or supportive presence. And I think it's neat for kids because it's kind of like, to circle back to the original point I was starting to make, giving a girl sports like icon hero character is empowering, I think, for young girls. But I think it's also good for young boys to see that, like, hey, like women can be pretty fucking awesome too. And when it gets them thinking about that, I think before they even like logically reason that like that's what they're intentionally seeing or being exposed to, is pretty awesome.
Yeah, and it's interesting too because so the first movie came out in 2006. So you've got it's 11 years later. So I think that the themes are able to have matured, and that's why, again, from everything that you guys have said about the second one was disappointing for this reason. That audience has aged, right? Like that, the original audience, not to say that there isn't a new audience or what have you, but the people that were probably, the most interested and excited about the first Cars movie in 2006 are 11 years older. And so the film is a little more complex. It's got a little more maturity. It's got a little bit more depth to its storytelling. And I think that's smart. It's why the Harry Potter books and stories were so effective for me, in that every single year those books got a little more complex as that audience would aged with the character and aged with the writing. Do I want to see another Cars movie? Like, that's sort of like a tough one for me because I feel like this was a really solid ending to this story. Like, I feel like I don't need any more out of this world because I feel like they've left it. They've tied up all of their bows. Everything is complete. I felt the same way at the end of Toy Story 3, and that's not stopping them from making another Toy Story. So if they make another one of these and it's good, by all means. When I was saying before that the ending was predictable, I don't mean that as a slight against the movie either. I think that this movie, for me, sort of did like Chekhov's trainer all the way through the story. Like, it kept bringing up this theme of the trainer-trainee relationship in a way that the others didn't as much. You know, it's like the trainer relationship before was all focused on Lightning and getting him better, but this one really showed what the trainer went through, and then you got to see it again with the second trainer and with Cruz as the trainer. So for me, it kept introducing these themes, and so the logical conclusion was that role reversal where Lightning steps into that role and experiences himself.
Mm-hmm.
Again, that's not a bad thing at all. In fact, that's what I would consider very smart writing, to introduce those themes and weave them through to where it builds up to a very logical, solid conclusion. So I like that so much. This is a Cars movie with good writing. Who'd have thunk?
Guys, this was totally Luke Skywalker teaching Rey Skywalker / Kenobi / whatever how to use the Force.
Did we just see? Yeah. Did we really just see the next Star Wars movie in a Pixar universe?
I think we did, guys.
Wouldn't that be awesome if we saw Car Wars? Yes.
It's time for the Piston Cup.
When we see The Last Jedi, we will be referring to Cars 3. So get on that.
Yeah. Oh no, we probably are. No, I think they're all owned by the same company.
I second everything you said. And yes, I think predictable in a way that, like, when there's a scene where they're training on the beach, you kind of saw right there kind of where this film could go. And yes, they did go in that direction. I thought, it started out slowly and built, and I really liked that. I also liked, this is Pixar. I thought visually the movie was stunning. I mean, they have a lot to work with in the world of car racing. You've got, cars going 200 miles an hour, whizzing past you, racing like door to door and getting rubbed against the wall and crashes. And not only that, but it's a very colorful world, right? You have all the colors of the cars. So they've got a target-rich environment. But I thought some of the things they did with virtual camera movement and like some low camera angles, like right in amongst the cars, I thought was pretty awesome. And we saw that with the trailer, with the big crash scene that's in this movie, which is pretty dark stuff for a kids movie, to see that happen to the main character, like right there. Again, it's not a human, but it's a character that you as a kid you care about, and you see that happen, and it was dead silence in the movie theater when that happened. So I thought it was a pretty effective scene. But yeah, as always, Pixar was great with the visuals in this movie.
I absolutely agree. Brian? No, go for it, Will.
I was going to say, there's another thing that I think was a very small touch, and I'm glad it was a small touch, because it would have completely, I think, derailed the story in another direction if they had spent more time with it. But I appreciated it that it was there. When they're dealing with sort of some of the older cars, the ones that were in that same racing group with Doc once upon a time, there's this one, like, there was a female car at that point who was talking about her experiences racing and how it was sort of a boys club and she had to kind of force her way into it. And I thought that was really cool. And then they cut over to just one car with a black voice actor who says, "Yeah, I know what you mean. I had to experience that too." And then it cut away. And I liked that, like, we got to see this Cars movie actually addressed both between that character and Cruz. It addressed like women's issues, and it dealt with the concept of race, and it just sort of naturally weaved it into the story without having like a giant neon line saying, we are tackling an issue here. So I appreciated that.
The only problem I had with that, and I don't want to get too deep into it because we got to wrap here in a bit, but she only got her chance, Cruz, because a man gave it to her, not because she proved herself. She proved herself to Lightning, and he gave up his shot to give her hers. So I don't know. Some of the power was stolen from that a little bit.
And that's not unfair. That's not an unfair thing to say. I think that when you already have Lightning as the primary character of that, I think that was that passing of the torch is the only way to do that, with 2 films of him as sort of the Paul Walker protagonist character. You have to kind of pass the torch from him to another character, and so you kind of have to deal with that sticky kind of like, male passing power to female, just because that's unfortunately where we're at. I think that if you just had him, like, for example, if like he just wasn't in the movie and this just kind of started with kind of Cruz getting her wheels beneath her and going, I don't think that it would be as resonant with the story that's been built up to here. I see 100% what you're saying. I just don't know how to I don't know how to write your way out of that box.
Yeah, Brad, you're right. It's a valid point, and it's something I thought about after the movie, but in the story, you've got to see Lightning's realization that, you know what I mean? And he's a male, so there's no, he's represented as a male character. So the audience has to see his realization that torch is being passed. So it's got to kind of go through him, unfortunately. It can't, I don't know if it would have worked well as if she just jumped on the track, like, I can fucking race these guys. I'll just jump on the track and do it. Rah! That's kind of, I don't know. It subverts your other main character in a way. So I don't know if that would have worked. It's a box that they had to figure out how to write out of. The one thing that I didn't, similarly, there were some things that Lightning said to Cruz during the race to kind of incentivize her, which were like, all the crabbies are gone, all the puffy clouds. Whereas you get the sense that if he was talking to another male racer, he would have been like, get on the high line and, hit the accelerator out of turn 3. I see that both sides. I see yes and no. On the no side, I see that was a callback. That was kind of an emotional callback to the beginning of their, mentor relationship. And I think you kind of had to have that to make that emotion, even though it kind of minimizes kind of her ability in a way. It still ties back to that emotional bond that they have. So I give it a little leeway there.
Yeah, I'm not saying it's bad. I mean, it's it's a sticky situation to try, like you said, to try and kind of write out of, right? Like, how do you give her own agency without it being handed to her? And I don't know. I guess you could have done it in a way where, like, surprise, she somehow entered the race and we didn't know it, and now she's on the track and she's racing under her own number, and maybe then Lightning kind of like realizes, like, hey, I can't beat this Storm guy, but I can sure help her do it. Maybe he runs interference with some of the other cars. Maybe he still like calls her on her cell phone, or I don't know. There were maybe some other ways it could be done. I think that's, out of all the things about this movie, that being my only complaint is pretty damn good.
Mine too.
And maybe this is the right way to handle it. Like, maybe the script as is the best possible way to handle the script because of the way it is, but you accompany that with conversations about, like, yes, like, this film's told a very simplistic story in terms of how this was approached, but you should also lampshade the fact that she did have to kind of borrow some of her agency from a male character, and that's not optimal. Maybe you leave it as is, and again, maybe someone can write a stronger script to kind of clear around it. I'm sure that's possible, but even this, just lampshading the idea and using it as a discussion point, I think is also pretty powerful.
I do want to talk about the strength of the script real quick. I know we got a segue here, but one of my biggest complaints about the first 2 movies was the comedy. And you guys know comedy's a weird thing for me anyway. But, like, there would be these stupid fucking jokes that just went on, like, far, far, far too long, even for people who kind of like that comedy. I was talking to a friend of mine today who really likes sort of like, like the Mater, like rednecky
cornball
stuff.
And
and he was like, as much as I like Mater, like in Cars 2 especially, the jokes just go way too far. Like, Mater will be driving and he doesn't realize that he's got like the spy device in him and people are following him. And, there's like this protracted, like 5-minute like sequence where he's like, hey, why is everybody following me? I don't know what's going on. They must really like my paint job. Like, so what I like about Cars 3 that's different.
You do that very well, by the way, Brad.
Yeah, that was pretty awesome. Vader.
Oh, thank you.
Well, he did grow up on a farm. Don't forget.
Wow. Well, thank you. I'm glad you like my Vader impression. But what this script does well is it still has some of those fun jokes, especially some of the some of the self-aware stuff. But it's almost like you feel him revving up, you feel him like hitting to just go around that turn into that joke and then just keep laughing. But with this film, the script is smart. It stops at like the arc of momentum, right? You get to it, and then it almost like pulls away from the joke a little bit. Like it lets you keep going and laugh, and then you're like, wait, what happened? Oh, we're on to the next thing. Cool. And I think that's how it like just keeps chaining that momentum, like one thing after another. It deals with some heavy themes, but it also kind of keeps that humor going too. So I feel like the comedy is a lot smarter here.
Yeah, especially, again, for me, once Cruise sort of turned into the story, I feel like there was a little spot kind of like right after the crash and up and kind of up until the time where they're doing the bus and all of that stuff. There's a little stretch there kind of in that section of the movie that felt a little stiff for me. Like it felt like it wasn't either hitting the comedy hard enough or it was just trying to avoid it completely. And so I mentioned before there are some spots that dragged, and that's specifically where there were for me. But I felt like once Cruise got to be a little bit more unsure, but kind of also playing the comedy off of that, like I think there was some really gold stuff. Like when she first like started kind of coming into her own and she makes this joke, like it was like I actually cringed and laughed because it was one of the most fucked up things I've heard in a Pixar movie. There's this joke where she says, I'm going to put you in the old folks' home and not visit you, old man. And I was just like, oh, that's dark, man. But it was funny. Like I got my loudest laugh because it was totally unexpected. And then they didn't linger on it. Like they didn't turn it into like a whole bit. Like it was just one of her little like barbs as she was like coming into her own and like starting to feeling cocky.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's a great call out of exactly what I was talking about, right? There was a possibility for them to just take it and run with it way too far, but it smartly pulls back. You let the joke land, and then boom, you're off to the races. You just keep going. So,
can I make one more point?
Of course.
I know we're running long, but one of the things that I really appreciate about this movie, and I know that I'm probably the only thing close to a racing fan that that is hosting this show, maybe even listening to this show. And I'm still a kind of a casual racing fan. I haven't been lately. But I was impressed with how much racing knowledge is packed in this movie. Like the rules of racing, particularly like NASCAR racing, racer relationships. These companies are like big businesses, and that's how they are in NASCAR now. It's not like Joe Dirt in his garage putting a car together and putting it out on the track. These are big corporations with multi-cars, always bringing new technology into the racing. Of course, we saw that right up front in the movie. And then kind of the feel of race day for the fans. The fierce and intimidating competitiveness between the racers and kind of the egos that they have. But then the camaraderie between the cars. I don't know if you noticed, like after the race was done and Cruz won the race, cars are coming up and like congratulating her. I mean, and that's how the racing circuit typically is. And I appreciated that in this story.
Well, and here's the question I have. Did she win the Piston Cup, or did she win like one of the races of the Piston Cup?
She showed that she could win the Piston Cup race because it was her driving abilities that actually won the race for that team.
But Lightning got the credit for the win, right?
Well, it's a rules thing. Like the driver of that car who starts the race gets the credit for they collect points during the season and stuff. So he would get the points for the win, not her.
And to be fair, like I think the takeaway on this one actually is like she possibly does go on to win the Piston Cup. Like this wasn't a cup. This was just the first race of the season. And so they would have, to Jim's point, like they would have earned points, and then that would have also dictated their placement in the next race and all of that. So kind of my takeaway is probably in the next race. Now she's in pole position. Is that right? Is that the word?
They would qualify for they would have a separate qualifier for the next race. But her team owner at the end of the race said, "You are going to race for me. You're going to be the new," and they showed some of that. You're going to be the new 51, racing for blah blah blah. So she's going to be in the Cup Series and she's going to race, and that's why it was kind of unclear. Is this the last movie, or are they going to kind of go forward? Who knows? It'll depend on how they do in the box office. But even if it ended, like you said, Will, if this ended the series, it would be a good way to go out.
Indeed, I agree as well. Well, guys, we need to wrap, so we're going to very quickly move through some quick plugs here for you guys. We're going to shift gears and move into plugs. That was bad. We're getting toward the end of the night. The puns are getting worse.
That one's good. That one works. That one's that's a solid. If baseball analogy, that's a solid double. I think that one does the trick.
Would it be too much like work to keep with the racing analogies? Will, really?
For me, who has never watched a car race in his life outside of like Pixar, like I feel like I've exhausted everything I may possibly know about cars.
Exhausted.
I still don't know whether if I go outside and look at my Kia, if it's going to have genitals and a tongue or not. Like this is how little I know about cars. Like this movie has totally changed my worldview. I don't know anything.
You just like walk up to the front of your car, unzip your pants, and like look down at the grill, like, wow.
Oh my god!
Yeah, it's like, come on. It's like the Mercury Mistress ads from Saturday Night Live. If you remember those, if not, go look them up.
You're like, are you already pre-Valvolined? Sorry. Anyway, okay. So for me, I just want to give a quick plug to Transformers: The Last Night. It's coming out this next weekend. I imagine we'll be reviewing it next week. I've been hearing that this may be Mark Wahlberg's last Transformers movie. So if you enjoy him in these films, this may be your last chance to see him in it. So go check it out. Come back for our show. That's all I got. Will, what do you want to plug this week?
I've also heard, maybe we should have covered this in movie news. I also heard that this is the last one Michael Bay is going to direct. He's going to switch over to producer role after this.
He keeps saying that.
I know.
Fucking movie.
I feel like at some point he's going to make good on that promise, and we're all going to cheer. But until then, I guess we'll see. I want to plug a different movie. One I actually watched just this afternoon, just sort of on a whim, and quite enjoyed. It's a documentary from this year. You can find it on Netflix. It's called They Call Us Monsters. And it's about this LA County like prison where you have these really violent like juvenile offenders. It focuses on 3 particularly. And the documentary focuses on the fact that like to those who are like advocates for like the juvenile side of things, these are just a bunch of kids who made some mistakes and are, but to the rest of like society, like these are adults and, as per the title, monsters. So it plays across both of those, but with sort of the hook of this guy comes in and these particular 3 kids sign up for this program where they want to take a script writing class with this guy who writes scripts. So they work with this script writer to sort of like work through the process of telling a fictional story. He's going to shoot some of it for them. It's very heartbreaking. It's inspiring and also a little like challenging because you get to really feel for these kids, and then you find out what they've done, and then you find yourself sort of like on the fence, like, oh shit, like, are these terrible, terrible monsters, or are these just kids who made some bad decisions? And I think it's a really solid documentary. It's called They Call Us Monsters. It's on Netflix, so you can watch it for, air quotes, free. And it's totally worth the watch.
All right. Awesome. Jim, close us out. What have you got?
Well. Yeah, so I was revved up by Cars 3, and I got the anticipation for seeing Baby Driver, right? Coming up. It's going to be opening soon, and I'm really jazzed for that. So all this car stuff. I started catching up on some classic late 60s and early 70s car movies. Movies from way before Fast and Furious started to be the car thing. And one that I watched while camping was called Dirty Mary, Crazy Larry. And it's from 1974. It's got Peter Fonda, Susan George, Vic Morrow, are some of the names you might know. It's basically a 90-minute heist / crime drama / car chase movie packed with so much stuff. Like, of course, Peter Fonda is being like, he's just a cool cat character. He's an aspiring pro race car driver whose desperation leads him to do an armed robbery, a kidnapping, and then jump in a car and lead the cops, who is Vic Morrow is the police chief, in a badass muscle car. I just love this movie for all the like practical car stunts that they had. There's no CGI in here. It's all like real action photography, cheesy dialogue, over the top acting. I really liked it. It's called Dirty Mary Crazy Larry. It's on iTunes right now for like a $3 rental. But if you want to catch some of that stuff, it's got one of the weird things that freaked me out. It has Vic Morrow doing stunts in a helicopter, which is very ironic now that, given the tragic death of Vic Morrow on the set of the Twilight Zone movie by a helicopter. So, great movie. Dirty Mary Crazy Larry. Check it out. Old school. iTunes rental for $3.
Talk about stunt casting.
Ha ha!
Oh, sorry, that was bad. All right. I think that is a sign that we have reached the end of this week's show. Just want to give a big shout out and thank you to all of you guys who joined us in the live chat. Great hanging out with you guys as always. Dan and Steve and Austin, you guys are the best. Love you. Thank you. Love you to our tape delay listeners as well. Guys, as we close out here, let's let our listeners know how to interact with us online. Jim, where can they find you?
They can find me on Twitter at JJPOutWest. That's my handle on Twitter. You can also find me on Facebook under my name, Jim Pugliafico. And
Jim, interestingly enough, there are 3 Jim Pugliaficos on Facebook now. I went to pull up your profile to wish you happy birthday last week, and I was like, oh, when did more Jim Pugliaficos join Facebook? This is weird.
Oh, I'm the jaundiced-looking one from I'm the green one.
Jim is referencing that his camera looks a little green today for some reason.
Yeah,
we'll take a look at it. We'll see what's going on.
I'm the Jim Pugliafico in Tucson that has a lot of bear friends. That's how you know it's me.
The one that has like 45 or more mutual friends.
Wouldn't it be great if the other 2 Jim Pugliaficos both moved to Tucson and then like also joined the bear community? And you just form this trio of Jim Pugliaficos. Like, I think that would be kind of great. You need to reach out to these people and lure them into your web, Jim.
We could have a Jim Pugliafico off.
Yes.
Or you could do like a special podcast called Trace Pugliaficos.
Yeah, good.
Trace Pugliaficos.
Your first review would be a retrospective on the 3 Amigos.
Yes.
Totally, absolutely.
Oh boy.
Will, where can people find you?
First place you can find me is earning a few bucks behind the Olive Garden off 35. But aside from that, you can find me. Yeah, but you can find me online on Twitter. I sometimes tweet about movies there a little bit. I'm at Whatever Cove. I'm much more active on Facebook, so just look for me there, William Lindis. I'm the William Lindis with the beard. And then you can also find me on Letterboxd. Just look for me there. I post about every single movie I watch. So feel free to follow me there and let's talk movies. I'd love to have those conversations with you.
Will, question, is it you giving handies behind the Olive Garden or your Kia?
Yes.
He makes the car do all the work.
Nice steering.
Got to pay off that insurance somehow.
All right. You can find me on Twitter at iBradPro or on Facebook. Just search for Brad Harris. Do me a favor. And some of you guys have been doing this, so that's awesome. Thank you. Shoot me a message before, like, if you want to friend me, please feel free, but just shoot me a message so I know you're from the podcast. A lot of folks just get like these blind friend requests and you're like, who are you? I don't even know. So last week, a few people were like, hey, I watched your show. I'm so-and-so. And I'm like, oh, awesome. Let's chat. So otherwise I might just kind of be like, who are you? Like, what? Because usually I only add people that like I've interacted with. maybe that sounds elitist. I don't know, but I'm trying to avoid the female spam bots, guys. So
Well, it's avoiding female spam box, and it's also like I think there's something to be said for like all three of us like post about all aspects of our life on Facebook, right? Like we're not just talking bear stuff, we're not just talking movie stuff, we're talking about other things as well, just like the normal minutia of our lives. So I think it's very, very, very fair just to like kind of let us know that you're an actual human being, as opposed to just another spam bot or something like that. We'd be happy to add you.
Indeed. All right. So we will see you all next week. Thanks so much for tuning in to this episode. Find past episodes on iTunes, Stitcher Radio, and of course on our website at moviebearspodcast.com. See y'all later. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.